Obviously, so I think that helps a bit.
So
Makes the blood flow a bit
walking
better.
from your house to your car and back into your house again?
This time just towards 100 meters away from my house.
So you're parking the car 100 meters away?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wish.
All right. Okay. And that's keeping you healthy, is it?
Let's just say I walked a bit more than I normally do, more than 2 meters. So it's a start. You've got to start somewhere.
You've got to start somewhere, and I'm sure our guest tonight will be touching upon starting somewhere. You're listening to the Empower Hour show. And the purpose of the show is to inspire, motivate, and empower you to achieve bigger and better things in your life and in your business. And we do that by inviting world-leading authorities who share their knowledge, experience, and expertise. As always, we would love for you to get involved. You can do that by emailing the studio on studio@salamradio.co.uk. You can text and WhatsApp us on 077 45 278 978, or you can send us a message through Facebook. Tonight's guest is a strategist, consultant, author, and executive coach who is enabling business leaders across the world to develop the mindset, skill set, and tool set to achieve sustainable results fast. Royston Guest is the owner and CEO of PTI Worldwide, a consultancy dedicated to growing businesses and unlocking people potential. The company's proven built to grow methodology draws upon decades of experience working with high-profile clients across 27 countries, including Harrods, Santander, NEC, Gatwick Airport and DHL, distilling insights into what it takes to build a truly high-performing organization which delivers accelerated, sustained and profitable growth. Good evening, Royston.
Good evening. It's great to be here on the show tonight.
Thank you for being here. We do appreciate you giving up the time to share your knowledge, experience and expertise with us, sir.
No, and it's brilliant to be able to have the opportunity to, share some of my insights and experiences of, what's worked in over 2 decades of helping grow businesses and also some of the lessons along the way.
We're looking forward to finding out all about those. What I'm really interested in, how did you get to start in business?
So the story is I started in construction. I was one of those children who had the itch when I was at school, and all I wanted to do was to get into the world of work. So I left school at 16 and I decided I was going to go and do a construction apprenticeship program. My first ever salary was £4,600 a year. And I started that on that apprenticeship program, doing a rotational program, got in the right place at the right time. And my formative years in business was all centered on construction and big projects, both here in the UK and then ultimately in America as well. So that's how I started in my career. And there was some great lessons from working in construction as well.
Okay, fantastic. And then from that, how did you develop into becoming a strategist, consultant, author and executive coach?
So when I came back I was doing a project in America where I was over there for 2 years. And when I came back to the UK, I went to work for a company called Jarvis. And Jarvis were just in the process of buying a lot of the rail companies off the government. And that was my first transition into more of a business development role. And I really started to experience culture and how you integrate businesses and, the importance of people and all the different moving parts of businesses. And then from Jarvis, I really started to get into the world of mergers and acquisitions. And I went to work for a Dutch company called Hugovens in the UK. And they ultimately merged with British Steel to form Chorus Group. And actually, it was at that time we'd bought this business in Chesterfield, a panel company. And we brought in one of the big accountancy firms, KPMG, to do some work for us. And I was sat in the office one night, it was 7 o'clock, and I was signing a cheque for KPMG, which was for some consultancy work for £105,000. And Shaz, it was one of those moments where I just sat back in my chair and I thought, do you know what? I've got so much broad generalist business experience now. I think there's a niche opportunity for a boutique consultancy people development business. So I decided to leave the organisation and go and set up on my own and really channel all my experiences into thinking about how I could help SME businesses to really grow their businesses. So that's how the journey started.
And what was the experience like from being employed to embarking on a journey of becoming self-employed?
It was a massive transition. I think there was a couple of things. One, I was lucky because at the time I did the transition, I didn't have any family. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. So I didn't have any real dependency. So I could take the risk because I was on my own and the only dependency I had was myself. The reality, though, was, I mean, I was earning a good salary in terms of what I was doing. And bearing in mind, this was, nearly 2 decades ago. I was earning at the time nearly just over £100,000. And in my first year in my own business, I earned something like £22,000. So it was a massive transition going from, working for somebody where you had the comfort of the safety net, the big salary, the expenses accounts, to really recognizing that, if you don't earn money in a month, you simply don't get paid.
Okay. And obviously that's very daunting for anybody who starts a business, and most of us who have started a business kind of go through that particular transition and transformation. What are some of the things that you did which helped you with that particular transition?
So I think the first thing is that for anybody who is either starting out on their journey, thinking about setting up a business, the most important thing for me is at the start of your journey is to be really clear about why you're doing it. And I can't stress enough the significance, the importance of this, because probably where the good point in starting to think about your why is to identify the 2 reasons which your why shouldn't be about. So number 1, it shouldn't be about that you want to make money. Money is the byproduct of really being purposeful and setting up a business that really addresses a need. So your goal should not be about making money. That's the byproduct. And the second thing, Shaz, is it shouldn't be about that you are what I call a technician with the entrepreneurial seizure. And what I mean by that is that you are a specialist. So, for example, the hairdresser who's working in a salon and suddenly decides that they want to set up a hairdressing business. The taxi driver who's working for somebody who suddenly says, I'm going to set up a taxi driving business. There's a very big difference between being a specialist or a technical expert in a particular field and actually being in the business of hairdressing or in the business of taxis or in the business of whatever it is that you need to do. So what the why should be about for me is that you are identifying a gap in the marketplace. And that might be where there's a niche opportunity that you can create, or you see a gap where people are not being served, customers are not being served in the way that you think they should be. And the whole philosophy, one of our principles that I've always adopted from first starting a business is that life's a boomerang. And if you add phenomenal value and you focus on adding more value than people were expecting, and you can really carve out a niche opportunity, then all the trappings of success will come, but it's about throwing the boomerang out there first and adding value. So I guess my message is that from the start, it's about being really clear about why you want to do it in the first place and what value you're going to add and what difference you're going to make.
Fantastic. As you were speaking there, I could hear Michael Gerber in the background just talking to me, because I was lucky enough to spend a whole day with him a couple of years ago, and I'm sure you've read the E-Myth. How important is it for a business to be systemized in your experience?
Phenomenally so. I think about all the work that we do, and there's 2 pathways that you can go down in life, Shaz. And I think the first is you can go down a pathway of trial and error. And the problem with trial and error is that it will elongate your timeline. You will burn a load of time and resources going down pathways that end up being dead ends, and it will lead to frustration. Now, I'm not saying that trial and error isn't a good way to learn. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And it doesn't matter how much you say to children, mind that change in level when they're learning to walk, because if you fall off that step, it's going to hurt. Sometimes you have to let them fall off and pick up a few bumps and grazes to realise it's not a good thing to do. So trial and error is a good pathway. However, I was really fortunate that in my apprenticeship programme in construction, I had a really wise general foreman who said to me, Royston, when you move around and you do your various disciplines around site planning, site agent, quantity surveyor, when you go around those disciplines, find the best 3 planners in Higgs and Hill, which was the company I did my apprenticeship with. Before you start your 6-month apprenticeship in that part of the discipline, get the 3 best planners in Higgs and Hill and ask them what is their success formula and what you need to do to be successful in planning. The same with quantity surveying and the other disciplines. So I passionately believe, in answering your question, that if you can take the pathway of trial and error and combine it with a second pathway of success modelling, where you can learn from other people who've already been there, they've bloodied the nose, they've picked up and done the trial and error, then you can fast track your success by combining the trial and error with the success modelling. So having a systemized approach to how you're going to grow your business by learning from others and creating the formula for success will allow you to really accelerate your journey and avoid the costly time and error.
Fantastic. I do have a couple of more questions around that for you, but we have a question from a listener. And his question is, Royston, what are your thoughts on ruthless capitalism of the 70s and 80s, especially on asset stripping of companies? One company that comes to mind is Hanson Industry, with Lord Hanson at the helm. Our listener personally thinks that this is okay, but the city does not like this anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
So my answer is quite simple, that I think that we take a much of a short-term view in terms of business today. And when you look at if you take the average tenure of a CEO for a FTSE 100 business, the average tenure is just over 3.5 years. And the problem is what that drives is it drives short-term behavior that isn't always good for the customer, that isn't good for the employees, and is not always good for shareholders. And I think there needs to be a much longer-term view that's taken in terms of how we add value for all those key stakeholders, the customer, employees, and for the shareholders. So I have nothing against capitalism and making sure that we're adding value, but where it's the demise or potentially damages the relationship for key stakeholders associated with the business, then I think we have a challenge in terms of selling capitalism and entrepreneurship, and there's a fine line between it being value-adding versus it being destructive.
Thank you for that. Coming back to your earlier point about being very clear on your why or on your purpose, sometimes we come across people who are very passionate about a particular business, trade, skill set, but there's not much profit in that particular sector. What would your advice be to them? Because all too often, and our guest last week was talking about how being passionate is important, it's good, but you can't actually bank passion. You can't go to the bank and say, here you go, I'm very passionate, Mr. Bank Manager, can you give me £100,000 just because I'm so passionate about this particular idea? So how does somebody balance passion and profits?
I mean, I'm a big fan. I watch Dragon's Den with a fantastic curiosity to see the people that come in and the pitches that they do. And, part of our business is we actually have an incubator model similar. And I get approached all the time with people that have business ideas that are just, they don't fly or they don't stack up in terms of the viability of the business. So I absolutely agree with, the person that was on last week that passion is an absolute essential ingredient, but it's got to be combined with a sound business idea that stacks up, that the numbers work, that you can ultimately grow and scale and has got some sustainability about it. And, when you think about that business model, people always ask me, Royston, what are the key metrics that you need to focus on? And, for anybody either who have got an existing business or that are setting out on the journey, there's three key things for me in looking at your viability of your model, which is around revenue, profit, cash. And it always amazes me that when you talk to, if you had 100 business owners and we had them in a room and we asked them how's business and what's the size of your business, 99 of them will quote a revenue figure. They will say we're a £200,000 business, a £1 million business, a 1.5, a £2 million business. And yeah, I know in the last 10 years, my business is more successful than the Royal Bank of Scotland Group. Mm-hmm. And how do I know that? Because the Royal Bank of Scotland Group has lost £48 billion and is still losing money to this day. And we've been in profit every single year. So turnover is the vanity line, the profit is the sanity line, and most importantly, what kills businesses and stops them realizing their growth ambitions is cash. And it still amazes me that how poor so many businesses are at managing their cash and really looking as cash as the fuel, the oxygen which grows the business. So for any business owner, they are your three key growth levers that you've absolutely got to be focused on and understand the interdependency of revenue, profit, cash.
Absolutely. And if profit's vanity, then I guess cash is reality, isn't it? Because there's money in the bank.
Absolutely. And Shaz, who's worse at collecting the cash in? Because we work across all different kinds of sectors, B2B, B2C, small businesses, big businesses, startups. The worst at collecting cash are professional services, believe it or not. Accountants, solicitors, Those people who absolutely teach us about debtors and creditors are the worst at getting their cash in. It's amazing.
Absolutely. It's about the same analogy as the cobbler's son's shoes. We're too busy advising other people, but we don't manage our businesses. So I think it's important to practice what you preach, I guess.
And that's about authenticity. And I always, with all my businesses, because I've got multiple businesses, but with our core PTI consulting business, I always want that to be a model case study. That if you talk to any of the people, is it a great place to work? When you go in the offices, so everything that we educate in the marketplace around growing businesses and unlocking people potential, everything that's in Built to Grow, I'm a passionate believer that my businesses have got to be absolutely walking proof of those principles in action, or else it is disingenuous and it's not authentic for me to be passionately talking about them with you at conferences, with business owners about how they can grow and scale their businesses.
Absolutely, and I think you're right there. If you've obviously worked with businesses across 27 countries as a strategist, consultant, and as a executive coach, what are some of the key ingredients, if I can call it that, which help a business grow from, say, £500,000 to £2.5 million?
So there's a couple of things which are absolutely fundamental, and in Built to Grow we talk about the 9 building blocks. So you mentioned the E-Myth, and the E-Myth is a great structured framework of how to grow and scale businesses. Built to Grow is based on a similar philosophy that there is a recipe for success, and when you understand the recipe and you understand all the moving parts that's involved in a business and the interdependency of them, then you can create a formula that will allow you to deliver consistent, predictable, repeatable results. So when you ask about growing a business from $500,000 to $2.5 million, there's a couple of key principles. And number one, for the business owner, the entrepreneur, or the business leader that's listening tonight, one of the key fundamentals is, and I see this so many times, is that why you set the business up in the first place and what your core skills are, make sure that you don't stop doing those. So what I mean by that is that what tends to happen is the business leader, the owner, the entrepreneur, when they start out on their journey, they're really passionate about either winning new business and the sales and going and talking to customers, or they're great at the operational side. And what happens is, for the owner who is great at sales and customer engagement and relationships, as they start to grow the business, they're like the pinball who's bouncing around from one challenge to the other. And what they start to do is they start to bring in people who can help them in terms of their growth ambitions that they've got. And they stop doing what they're great at and what their passion is and what they enjoy doing. And one moment they sat back in the chair at 7 o'clock at night and they're thinking about, the people they brought in who now head sales and head customer experience, and they're sat doing all the things that they hate doing, which is, finance, operational stuff, or whichever it might be. So one key message is never stop doing what you're great at, and most importantly, what you enjoy doing and why you set the business up in the first place. And fill around you people with skills, with expertise that will help you to compensate for your weaknesses. And I think that is so fundamental when you talk about, number one, starting to think about how you grow from $500,000 to $2.5 million. That's one key principle.
Fantastic.
Do you want me to share a couple of others?
Yes, of course, that would be very good.
So the second one is that actually growing and scaling a business is not difficult. And actually, what's your pillar strategy, what I call your foundation, your pillar growth strategy, is around 3 things. And it's around what I call your AMR strategy, which is about how do you acquire new customers, how do you maximize the value of the relationships you've got, and then how do you make sure that you are locking the back door of your business firmly shut by making sure that you are driving your retention. And the problem is that most business owners, as a £500,000 business, they'll be focused on the sexy, exciting, silver, shiny thing at the front end in terms of the acquisition of customers. And if you've got a business that's turning over $500,000 and perhaps the business has been running for 3 or 4 years, then what tends to happen in your first 3 or 4 years, it's like lilies on a lily pond. Mm-hmm. Your business doubles for the first few years. Then you get to the 3 or 4 year mark where you're turning over £500,000, and then your business starts to flatline. And your accountant or your bookkeeper comes to you at the end of the year and you're really excited because you've worked really hard all year you know you've been really hard at driving sales, and they share with you the results for the year, and the business is flatlined, and even profitability has gone backwards. Now, the question is, why does that happen? And the reason it happens is because most businesses are not focused on thinking about their business growth strategy in the context of these three buckets. And all that's happening for that business at the 3 or 4 year mark is they are acquiring new businesses at the front end. They're bringing them in through the front door of the business. But all that's happening is they're compensating for the business, the clients or customers that they're losing out the back door of the business. Hence the reason that the business is flatlining. So if you have ambitions of getting your business from 500,000 to 2.5 million, it's about thinking about how you think about your growth strategy in the context of these three buckets. What are we doing to acquire new customers? How are we maximizing the value of the existing relationships and customers that we have? And also, how are we driving multiple retention strategies so that we make sure that we're locking the back door of our business firmly shut in order to make sure that those three growth levers are all working in unison, which will allow you to start to create growth and scale.
Fantastic. Was there a third tip that you wanted to share, or have you already covered that, Royston?
No, I mean there's a third one as well, which is about people. And there's no doubt about it, you know, irrelevant of whether you're a B2B or B2C, people are one of your growth enablers. And I know certainly from all the work that we do in the marketplace and from the surveys that we do and the hands-on experience, people tell us, particularly in SME small businesses, that people is one of the biggest challenges that they have. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt about it that as you start to hire and to scale and grow your business, you're going to have to bring in the right people. Now, for me, there's two ways of doing this. Number one, it's about who are the people that you need to bring on who are salaried and you actually bring into the business. But the second thing is that there's so many specialist functions that are out there now that one of the things you really need to protect is your overhead and your cost base every single month. So it's about how you blend who are the people that you need to bring in because you need those experts in-house, and who are the people that you can tap into. So, for example, do you need to have an in-house bookkeeper, or can you partner and bring in a part-time bookkeeper who will do 2 or 3 days a week who have got a bookkeeping business? Do you need to bring in a full-time marketeer, or can you work with a marketing agency who have got a portfolio of small SME businesses? You know, do you need to bring in somebody to do your HR and people, or can you work with Peninsula or one of these organizations that's out there that are HR specialists? So it's about how you manage your cost base through working with specialists, but also bringing in-house the people and making sure that you are ruthless in your recruitment and that you really employ and hire attitude and that you teach skill, because the right people will allow you to catapult your business forward. The wrong people will set you back 4 or 5 notches in your growth ambitions.
You're absolutely right there. And from my own experiences of having worked with hundreds of businesses, the biggest challenge or the most common challenge business owners face is people management. Do you have any particular tips or strategies on how to manage people better and how to retain them for longer?
So yeah, I mean, the dynamics of recruiting people, particularly when you think about the millennials who are coming of age, you know, people is absolute fundamental. And I think there's a couple of key principles that I think are really critical when you're hiring people and when you bring them in. Number one is that there's an alignment in terms of their personal values with the values of the organization. And if you really look at the motivations and drivers for people today, particularly when you think about, you know, behavioral economics, people are looking for meaning and purpose. So having a really compelling vision and purpose for your organization that people really buy into will be the difference between whether people are coming in and swapping contractual hours or whether they're coming in and are really connected emotionally and prepared to put the discretionary optional commitments on the table and really go the extra mile. So I think, you know, really creating a North Star for your organization that really gets people connected, both in terms of their personal values and also the purpose of the organization, is one fundamental principle. I think the second is that you set people up for success. And by that, I mean that there's a really simple question, I think, which is one of the most powerful questions that you can ask in your people strategy, which is simply this. Do your people know what excellence looks like in their role from both a numerical or behavioral objectives perspective, but also from a behavioral perspective? And I think the challenge is we don't set people up for success by being really clear about what the expectations are what great looks like in their role, and then helping to coach and mentor them towards achieving that objective. So I think they are two absolute fundamentals when you think about unlocking people potential.
You've made some fantastic points there, and I will touch upon those after the break. We're just about to go towards a very short break. Please do stay with us, where we'll be asking Royston for some more key insights. Speak to you in a few moments.
You're listening to Salam Radio, and it's now time for Maghrib Azan.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا
الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم، وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم بك نحيا وبك نموت وإليك المصير. رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا.
A late night recipe. Slice some chips and put in the deep fat fryer. Fall asleep in front of the late film.
Wake up. Leave pan on.
This is Salam Radio, Peterborough's Muslim community radio. Broadcasting on 106.2 FM and online.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for staying with us, and if you've just joined us, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to Salam Radio on 106.2 FM and Inspire FM on 105.1 FM. You're listening to the Empower Hour show The purpose of the show is to inspire, motivate and empower you to achieve more in your life and in your business. We do that by inviting world-leading authorities who share their knowledge, experience and expertise. I have with me my co-host Hasib. Hasib, are you still awake? Because I know
I'm enjoying the show.
I've kept you very quiet in the first half because I was hoping you would kind of take everything in like a sponge and then have lots of questions for Royston. And
I'm built like a sponge. I'm not taking information.
Are you like a sponge when it comes to eating food?
Yes, I'm pretty good at that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, at least
I'm the opposite of yourself.
At least you're good at something, aren't you? And I know you've been kindly noting all the questions from our listeners, and hopefully you'll be able to ask those to Royston. Our guest tonight is, like I've said, Royston, who is the CEO of PTI Worldwide, a global consultancy and training company with a proven track record in delivering business growth, personal development and peak performance. Royston is a strategist, consultant, executive coach and an author. Hi Royston, are you still there?
Join the show.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for holding on during the break. I am going to pass you over to my co-host now, Hasib, who will be asking you a few questions from our listeners.
Hi, Royston. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Hasib. Great to be with you.
I've been listening to the first half an hour. Brilliant insights that you've given. Fantastic advice that you're giving to business owners. Also for business owners, the listeners, if you're a business owner, a startup or thinking of starting a business, please text or WhatsApp us on 07745 278 978 or give us a ring on the studio on 01733 602 133. Royston, just like to ask you, this is a question for myself before I move to the listeners, what question they asked. How was your time at school? Because you went to apprenticeship, you didn't go to uni. And also, I was reading up on that where you were at the age of, I think it's 2021, where you moved to America and was a project manager.
Yeah, so school for me, I always remember my final year at school, and when I got my calendar for the whole calendar year, I almost counted down my final whole year in school, crossed off the days. I didn't like the formaic nature of every single day, every single week being in the classroom and doing the same things week after week. I almost felt stifled by it. So for me, it was a no-brainer that university wasn't the pathway for me, that it was about how I could get into the real world of life, into business, and go through an apprenticeship. And that was kind of my university of life that I went through. And what was great was, when you think about the average graduate that were coming out of university at 21, 22 years of age, by 16, I'd had 6 years work experience by then. And it was just, I was so far advanced in terms of my thinking and developing my skill set. So people have different pathways in terms of how the pathway they want to go down. And I've got a lot of friends and a lot of people who went to university and did the degree. And I just think it's about personal preference. Mine was the apprenticeship route.
You like the hands-on experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that came from the fact that my dad was an entrepreneur. He set up his own business. And during the summer holidays, I always remember when I was 15 years of age, I always used to hang around with friends who were a lot older than me because my sister was 3 years older than me. So I remember when I was 15 years of age, I wanted to go away with my friends to the south of France. And my dad said to me, okay, I'll let you go, but how are you going to pay for it? And I said, well, Dad, that's what you're for. And he said, absolutely not, son. He said, you need to learn the appreciation of money. He said, if you want to go, no problem. But for the first 4 weeks of your summer holidays, you need to go and work in Hull on a roof with the guys, get picked up at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning. You'll be back at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and you need to earn the money to pay for your holiday. So I always had this appreciation of, A, the importance of money and hard graft. And the second thing was about this work ethic. So, yeah, that's probably what drove me down the pathway of an apprenticeship.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Listeners come with the questions and asking, how did you get to your proven success formula, a formula you knew worked for yourself?
So, because of the work that I'd been doing in construction and in the businesses and the mergers and acquisitions world, it came through two things. Well, actually, three pathways. One was through trial and error of what I was doing in businesses every single day. The second was then about how I was applying the model of success modeling And I had a lot of mentors, I had a lot of coaches. I mean, I've probably read over my lifetime, you know, more than, I would say, something like 1,500 business books. If you saw my business library, it's crazy. So I've always had this thirst for knowledge in terms of feeding my mind. So it's come from two things. One, the research combined with over 2 decades now. And, you know, we have literally worked with tens of thousands of businesses across 27 countries. So the great thing is with Built to Grow now, which launched in November 2016, is that Built to Grow is the culmination of 2 decades. And the way that I always talk with clients now is that they have no passion for their business to be a laboratory or a test bed. And the great thing with Built to Grow is it is jam-packed with all the ideas, strategies that we have tested with our own money. And, you know, I've lost a lot of money. I've made some bad decisions along the way, but I've learned from them quickly. And what Built to Grow does now is, which is why all the work that we do with clients, we can grow and scale businesses very quickly because we have that replicatable, predictable success formula that, irrelevant of your industry or sector, the principles of business growth are universal, whether it's here in the UK or whether it's in Asia, whether it's in America, Latin America, Europe, wherever it is. So, yeah, it's through trial and error and success modeling is where I've learned it from.
Your book, Built to Grow, who is it aimed at?
So Built to Grow is aimed at a number of different target audiences. Number one, it's for the person who's thinking about starting on their business growth journey and wants to get some early insight into what it takes, particularly when I talked about earlier, you might be the technician or the specialist in a certain area, but now you're starting to explore, if I wanted to set a hairdressing business up, what would it need to look like and how would I need to be thinking? So it will work for the startup. It will work for the individual that's in that growth journey, whether it's infancy, adolescence, who are really thinking about, they've done some trial and error, but now what they want to do is they want to fast track their success. They don't want to be burning their money. They don't want to be taking on people and getting hiring decisions wrong. So they want to tap into a formula where they can start to apply it and personalize it to their business. And then it will also work for the seasoned business professional. And bear in mind, you know, at the top end, we work with a lot of, you know, the big organizations, you know, Shaz mentioned, you know, Harrods, you know, some massively established businesses who use Built to Grow as a almost reality check to make sure that they're not getting into bad habits. So the great thing is it covers the full spectrum, whether you're in startup mode, what I call your infancy, adolescence, the groove, or the maturity.
Also, you just mentioned Gatwick and Harrods. That's a business that you have worked for. They're huge businesses. What did you do to help them make them better than they are already?
So, one, I tend to work, and where a lot of my work is working in with the boards around what their growth strategy is moving forward. So some of it is about what I talked about earlier, about have they really got the acquisition, maximization and retention strategies in place. Some of it is about how they set their organization up as a high-performing culture, which is around vision and values and purpose. Some of it is about enabling and working with their leaders and really developing leadership capability. So it's a complete spectrum. You know, the Built to Grow gives you a complete smorgasbord of different ideas and strategies, and every business is unique and they've got their own set of challenges. So it's about how we personalize, understand where the business is at, where it's trying to get to, and what our kind of tailored solution needs to look like in order to bridge the gap.
You just mentioned leadership capabilities. What are the key traits of great leadership?
Wow, that's a huge question, and you know, I talk about in chapter 4 of Built to Grow. I talk about some of the key traits of great leaders. I think number one is that it's authenticity. I think is really important. That you are a role model and that you walk the talk, and that, you know, people aspire and are truly inspired. You know, one of my passionate beliefs is that you can't motivate anybody in life. You know, motivation is a personal choice. And our job as leaders is to be inspirational leaders, where we can really understand the motivational triggers that we can press to ignite somebody's self-motivation, desire and will to want to do it for themselves. So there's no doubt about it that, you know, being inspirational is absolutely a fundamental trait in terms of a leader. I think, you know, there's some traits around being a visionary, particularly as an entrepreneur. It's about how you set the North Star, the direction of travel that really people anchor behind. There's things around being, you know, strategy, because it's great having a vision and ideas, but how do you turn those ideas into reality? So it's about being grounded in terms of how do you translate those into a strategy, into tactics that you can really deliver against. And then there's also some key skills around, your personal resilience. Some days it feels like you're a pinball when you're running your own businesses, and you're wearing multiple hats. So how do you really recharge, build your personal resilience, and get your energy levels up? Because, it's not easy running a business.
No, it isn't. Also, many businesses, instead of focusing on one thing, they try to focus on too many things at once. What's your views on that? You'd rather have focus on something, at one thing, and be the best at it, rather than focusing on many other things in businesses?
So it's a really great question. And it's interesting because the marketplace goes through different cycles. Probably a good example in answering your question is, and it's about, do you become a generalist or do you become a specialist? And one of the dangers in business, I think you've got to be really careful of, particularly when you're in your early stages, is that you don't try to be everything to everyone. Because in trying to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to anyone. And you stretch yourself too thinly and you lose your focus. So, Tesco's is a great example of this. They went through a whole expansion program where they went on a global expansion. They moved away from just food and they started to do, giraffe cafes or whatever the cafe brand was called. Then they started to go into garden centres and all different things. And when Dave came in as the new CEO, he's been in there just over 5 years now, he had to bring the business back to its core focus, secure the core. And it's only in the last 12 months with the acquisition that they've done recently that you've started to see them grow again. So it's a really interesting question. And, I think you've got to be really careful that you're not trying to be everything to anybody and ended up being nothing to anyone. So I think there's going to constantly be a swing in the marketplace about, are you a generalist or are you a specialist?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Royston. I also find lots of people tend to lack focus, and yet I remember seeing a documentary of Warren Buffett, and I think I also read in Jim Collins' book Good to Great that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett were at a particular party together, and there were about 12 people on a table, and they went around asking people, what's the one word that best describes how you behave and how you perform? And both Warren Buffett and Bill Gates said focus. Focus was the one key thing that really helped them develop their business. So I guess the question is, A, how important is focus in your opinion? And B, for those people who perhaps aren't very focused, what can they do in your experience to become more focused?
So I absolutely endorse, and I use the expression that where focus goes, energy flows. And there's a great Russian proverb that says, if you end up trying to chase two rabbits, you end up catching neither. And there's a caption underneath it that says, are you suffering from rabbititis? Mm-hmm. So absolutely focus is a key skill. And, the number of business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs that I sit with, and, they will say to me, Royston, I'm really busy. And, there's no doubt about it, especially when you're in your early years. You don't have the luxury of resources and people and abundance of people that some of the big organizations have. That you are like the pinball, you're wearing multiple hats. 1 minute you are looking at finances, the next you're sales, the next you're dealing with a customer complaint, then you're thinking about operations, then you're ordering products. So there are multiple hats that you need to wear. But, and here comes the but, whenever everybody says to me, Royston, I'm really busy, it's easy to make yourself busy. My question is, are you productive? So I think it's about being ruthless with your time and really thinking about what is worthy of your time, what are the things that only you can do, and being ruthless in terms of your prioritization about what are the things that are really going to allow you to move your business forward, make a difference. And even to this day, every single Monday I sit down with my PA and I have my model week, which is my high performing week, which is broken down into a number of different buckets. And we're always working about, right, how long can you spend in this area? What are you doing over here? And we are ruthless in terms of my self-management. And there's a key word in there, self-management. I think time management is victim language. Time flies. The great news is you're the pilot. Yeah. So it's about taking ownership for really thinking about the amount of time that you've got and how you use it. And I'll tell you a great example of where I think people get this right is, our board is made up of a 50-50 divide between men and women. So in terms of diversity, we're really equally balanced. And my wife is phenomenal because she actually works in as our group marketing director as well. And Kate, who works in our business, and where you have females who are mums as well, and they have a finite amount of time. So, for example, they can come in at 9, but they've got to leave at 5. Their ability to burn and get stuff done between 9 and 5, they can make other people look just, completely inadequate, because when they've got that amount of time, they know they don't have time just for the chitter chatter. They develop this laser beam focus and are so productive and probably get through, a burn rate of, what 2 people will get through within that time scale. So it is possible, but it requires discipline.
Absolutely. And in my business, Royston, you probably won't be surprised to hear that I employ more women than men, and they do a much better job. In fact, they're twice as good as any man I've ever employed.
But no, I think your balance and your mix is really important.
Of course it is. Of course.
Men and women bring different perspectives. Kate, who's on our board, she's massively people focused. So she's the great regulator for us to make sure that we are engaging our people, that we are taking them with us, that we are doing the celebrating success as well as being so focused on where we're going as a business. So you're absolutely right. The balance, it's like a team, it's the recipe, and it's the fusion of different personalities with different experiences and also the different mindsets that creates the success formula.
That's very important. We have another question from a listener, and the question is, if a business is profitable and has plenty of cash, what's the best way of trying to grow it?
Wow, that's a huge question.
It's a broad question, yes.
It's a broad question, yeah. My answer is always that if a business is carrying too much cash, my question is always, is it reinvesting enough in order to realise its growth ambitions? It's a difficult question to answer without really understanding the business. But what I would say is that when you start to look at within the business about who are the quality customers, and if you profile the customers that you've got, who are the profitable customers, what's the profile of them, what are the products and services that are really delivering for you and delivering profit and margin. So it's about really getting underneath the skin and analysing what is working in your business and what isn't, so that you can start to find the channels and the parts of your business that really are scalable, that are worthy of significant future investment in order to create scale and grow.
That's a good answer. You mentioned earlier on when you were speaking with Hasib that you've read the best part of 1,500 books. What are your top 3 most favourite books, Royston?
Wow, that is a.
I've made it really easy for you. People usually ask you for one book, and I made it really easy by asking you to give us 3.
Okay, so my top book would be Built to Grow. Actually, can't say that's my own book. No. So there's a couple which are really practical. So Jack Welch was the youngest CEO of GE in 1981, General Electric, and during his tenure, GE share price rose 4,300%. So when you asked me that question earlier on about sustainable legacy business and not asset stripping and so forth, to build a business and make it profitable for over 2 decades demonstrates to me that you are a leader who is focused on the long term and you're not just playing a short term game. So, Jack Welch has brought out a book called Winning, and I think, it is just jam-packed with all his real-world experiences. So I tend to lean towards the books which are from real business people, not from people who come at it from a theorist perspective, but have put in the hard yards, who have got a proven track record. So Jack Welch Winning would definitely be one of them. I think the other one is, and this is more of a personal transformation book, some of Robin Sharma's stuff is great. So, in terms of being really balanced around, 3 principles that really drive me when people say, what is success about? I talk about health, wealth, and wisdom. That, your greatest wealth is your health, and making sure that you are absolutely, protecting and maintaining your health. Wealth for me is not just about the money that you acquire. It's about, wealthy in terms of mindset, family, everything else. And then wisdom. which is about really feeding your mind on a regular basis. So Robin Sharma, which would be my second book, has got a great book out called The Saint, the Surfer and the CEO. It's a fantastic book that's just about really thinking about, the psychology of success and your mindset. And then the third book, that will be a difficult call. There's another really practical book, which is by a guy called Howard Schultz, who was the CEO of Starbucks.
Yeah.
One of the things he talks about is how he built Starbucks one cup of coffee at a time. But then he brought out a second book when he went back in for his second tenure as CEO, which is called Onwards. And again, there's some real, for the listeners today, if they really want practical, real world, what works in business, Onwards is a great read.
Oh, and all those three books are a fantastic read. I totally agree with you. A bit like you, I'm also a bookworm, so I'm always looking for new titles, and I have read all those three books, and I totally agree. They are a very good read. After, of course, Built to Grow. You mentioned about working with mentors, which from my own personal experience, I believe is very important. How important do you think it is for a business owner to have a mentor, and how should they go about choosing a mentor who would be best aligned to their personal goals, values, and their aims and objectives?
So one, I think it's really important because it links into that whole pathway that I've talked about, which is success modeling. And the reality is that there are so many people out there who are more than happy to share their expertise, their experiences, and help business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs to navigate a pathway of avoiding trial and error and going down the pathway of success modeling. So I'm a huge advocate of having mentors, having coaches, but also creating, mastermind groups. So, it can be a lonely place running your own business. So even getting in a mastermind group with, half a dozen or a dozen business owners, leaders that are in different sectors or industries or businesses from you, but just getting together so that you can share best practice. Because some of the best innovations or the best ideas don't always come from your industry or your sector. They come from what other people are doing and how you can take that idea and integrate it into your business. So I think there's so many different forums out there, and the governments are so focused, and banks as well, are so focused with mentor programs that there's a plethora of different channels that you can go out and really tap into today. So I think it's absolute must that you miss an opportunity if you're not in mastermind groups, if you're not in mentor, and even some of the social groups, like on LinkedIn. I mean, we have a group on Facebook which is about Built to Grow, which has got hundreds of members. And I'm always posting stuff in there and articles, and we've got the same on LinkedIn as well. So it doesn't always have to be that you have a physical mentor that you're meeting with. It's about how you tap into some of those groups that are out there on social media. But also, I have something that I call my virtual board.
Yep.
And what do I mean by my virtual board? There are certain, peer colleagues in the marketplace who I really admire. So one of them is a guy in America called Russell Brunson, who created something called ClickFunnels. He sits on my virtual board. Robin Sharma sits on my virtual board. Anthony Robbins sits on my virtual board. And when I follow these guys, I attend some of their stuff. Now, it's virtual, but I'm constantly using them around my table to where I draw my knowledge and expertise from that feed me in terms of my energy levels.
And Russell is a fantastic kid. I met with him back in 2013 through Dan Kennedy. And he's a very optimistic and focused young guy, and I think he's done exceptionally well. I'm pleased to hear that he's on your virtual board. And obviously Tony's the master, isn't he, at being able to inspire people to achieve more very quickly.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that I'm really focused on, you're absolutely right. I guess one of the things I'm focused on is that, it amazes me that here in the UK, we don't have an Anthony Robbins or a Russell Brunson. There's not those profiles. So, what I want to see a niche gap is, and my passion is about two things every single day. How can I help people grow businesses? How can I help them to unlock their potential and also their people's potential? And I think there's a big gap in the UK market, and I am so focused on throwing my boomerang out there, adding phenomenal value in helping people grow their businesses and, thought leadership and throwing out all the great stuff that we do, because I think there's a real niche opportunity to almost fill that gap and that void in the UK and the European market.
In 20 seconds, because the show's about to finish, I know you're a very busy entrepreneur. What do you do to relax, Royston?
So, great question. The recovery zone is just as important as the performance zone. So I've got 2 kids, 1 5, 1 2.5. So weekends are sacrosanct for me. It's family time, no mobile phone switched on, just purely tuning into family. So that's one of my big things in terms of that quality time, you know, and to be a really active dad. And then the second thing is, you know, I'm a big sports person, so I do a lot of running. I'm just getting back into golf now. The kids are getting a bit older. So, you know, I really focus hard on terms of, you know, playing hard in the performance zone.
I'll have to cut you short there. Thank you very much, Royston. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for being here tonight.
Your number one for local, national and international news across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough on